Hey there, wicked listeners, and welcome to episode 7 of Wicked Crimes. As always, there is some admin we need to go through before we jump in. And I think I want to start by asking if everyone is having the same absolutely horrible 2026 so far. It really is bad. I have had my not first, but first 2 road rage incidents where I wasn't at fault in either one, I promise. In fact, the second one was between other cars who almost caused a pile-up on the highway and then, in trying to hit each other, forced me off the road. Then I've been having internet issues since last week, and the techies I keep getting out tells me that it's an exotic issue, which I've come to learn just means nobody knows what the hell is going on or how to fix it. I found a trick that allows me to connect to the internet, but it's not a long-term solution. I have to connect to the Wi-Fi extender, which is in our roommate's room, and that's at the farthest point of the house. So my internet connection is unbelievably unstable and slow. And then, when trying to script this episode, I realized that somehow with all the internet issues, all of my research on the case I wanted to cover somehow disappeared off my drive. The document completely reverted to a previous version, and I need to research the entire serial killer, all of his crimes, and his victims all over. So, unfortunately, you won't be getting that episode today. When I did try to record today's episode, I also realized that my microphone broke. Yes, it's one of those weeks. Luckily, I have discovered some of my old cases, so today you're getting a rewind episode. You're going to listen to a case I covered in 2021. Then next, I am in talks with someone to help me create a social media presence for the podcast. One of the conditions for her coming aboard was that my episodes need to be more consistent. So I'll only be releasing an episode every 2 weeks, and I'll be releasing them on Mondays now, since that will give me the weekend before I need to release it, in case I ran out of time during the other 2 weeks, which is highly unlikely. Now, on a more serious note, there is something else we need to discuss. Not long ago, I spoke about Nicole Engelbrecht releasing an episode regarding identifications of minors in South Africa. While I suggest you listen to her episode for a more complete understanding, it has come to my attention that I need to explain certain points directly. This relatively new law basically just says that anyone under the age of 18 may not be publicly identified through any medium, including social media posts, group chats, podcasts, etc. This applies to victims, witnesses, and offenders before, during, or after criminal proceedings. And this law persists even after they turn 18. Basically, the only time this legal protection ends is at death. To put it in perspective, there is currently a case in South Africa where a couple is being prosecuted for allegedly creating child sexual abuse material using their own children. This couple may not be publicly identified, because that will identify their minor victims. Even if one of the victims happen to pass away, the accused and the victim may not be identified because it could identify the surviving minor victim. However, should both children pass, they may be identified because the law no longer applies. Additionally, if one or even both of the children decide to at any stage of their lives write a book, or even just make a comment on a social media post in which they identify themselves as minor victims, they could technically be prosecuted for it. Even the victim needs to obtain a court order to allow them to publish any information that could identify them. The law was passed because a group of people that included both victims and offenders pointed out how their identities being made public has caused harm to them. While I 100% agree with the law in regards to victims and witnesses, especially since they have proven that it has caused harm to them, I do have some difficulties with the offender side of the law. I agree that some minor offenders should not be identified. We've seen an increase in children committing offenses because adults use them knowing that children tend to get off easier and face less severe consequences. Some children also just do stupid things. So, if a 16-year-old steals a car for a joyride and accidentally causes an accident and someone loses their life, I believe the child should face severe consequences. But they should be allowed to try and create a meaningful and productive life as an adult, having learned from these mistakes. That being said, repeat and intentionally harmful actions should not be protected by anonymity. If, for example, a minor sexually assaults someone and then goes on to commit one or even multiple murders to cover up that sexual assault, I believe that it is something that should follow them for the rest of their lives, because I don't think they can be rehabilitated, and protecting them could place others in danger when the offender inevitably gets paroled at a relatively young age. No, seriously, a minor convicted of these crimes at around the age of 15 can actually be released on parole by the age of 30. That's a whole lot of life left for them to find more victims. Lastly, the law does cover minors who have been previously identified as well. Even if all their information is a matter of public knowledge, I cannot cover their cases and identify them again. So now that you and I have a bit of a better understanding of the law, I'm sure you'll understand why I won't be able to cover quite a few South African cases where minors are involved in the future. Okay, that's enough of that. I think that's probably all the admin, and far too much of it. So let's just get over into our case.
Please be advised that this podcast contains content that could be harmful to some listeners. This includes, but is not limited to, strong language and graphic descriptions of violence, sexual activities, assault, and death. This podcast also engages in discussion regarding various religions, spiritual beliefs, and practices, some of which might be harmful or triggering for some listeners. Please reconsider before consuming this content. The information contained within this podcast is mainly gathered from news articles and official court documents where available. Should you have any more information, or if you know of any incorrect information in this content, please feel free to contact the host through the email found in the show notes.
Today's episode is extremely disturbing, and I'm adding an extra warning that this episode is especially gruesome. I won't be going too deep into detail on injuries sustained, but more than one child loses their life during this horrific crime. If you think that might bother you, I suggest you skip this episode and tune in again next week for our second in-betweener episode. If you are still listening, let's get into the Mncwabe family feud. The Mncwabe family seems to have been destined to experience pain. Our story begins with a natural death. A male member of the Mncwabe family passed away from natural causes, and as the family mourned his death at his funeral, his uncle, Mncwabe, made an eerie prediction and told the brother of the deceased man to not cover the grave, as another death would soon follow. Whether by some divine gift or because he had something to do with it. Mncwabe was correct. And 5 months later, the sister of this man also passed away. While grieving the loss of another family member, the two remaining brothers of the deceased siblings remembered their uncle's words. And growing up with a strong belief in witchcraft, they were fully convinced their uncle had been dabbling with witchcraft, and that he had caused the death of their siblings. How else would he have known another death was coming? And if he had already managed to cause 2 deaths with these supernatural forces, how many more lives would he take? While I agree that it's eerie that Mncwabe had known that another death was imminent, that does not prove that he was dabbling in any dark arts. In fact, for those that believe in witchcraft, clairvoyance is also a feasible answer. A clairvoyant person is someone that possesses the supernatural ability to perceive events in the future or beyond the normal sensory contact. So if we accept that witchcraft does exist, then we should also accept that the possibility is there that this man could see the future, or at least some sort of sign around death's next companion. In fact, there are many religions that believe that before a person passes, they take on a recognizable aura, and those practiced enough or born with a supernatural gift can recognize this aura. But this is all pure speculation, and it is impossible for us to prove which one, if any of these reasons, are true. That is also the problem the court faces when witchcraft is entered as a factor to any crime. This is also the problem with the Witchcraft Suppression Act, and why so many groups and organizations are moving to have it declared unconstitutional. But back to the case. After the death of his sister, the 2 remaining brothers, Tulani Donatus Mncwabe, aged 28, and Sibonelo Eric Mncwabe, aged 26, decided to not wait and see if they would be next, but rather to take matters into their own hands. On the evening of the 20th October 2015, the 2 brothers made their way to the property in Maphaleni and Umzinto, which is in the Scottsburg district. This is where their uncle and his household resided. They made their way to the rondel they knew he would be staying in, and they set the grass rooftop alight. This awoke Mncwabe, and he attempted to run from the burning building. As he opened the door, he came face to face with the 2 brothers. The brothers had prepared quite well for this attack, and were armed with bush knives. A bush knife is similar to a survival knife, but quite smaller, and is usually used to skin small game and in making traps. The 2 brothers used these bush knives and viciously attacked their uncle. In a normal human reaction, Mncwabe started screaming for help. This woke his 2 granddaughters, Nontando, aged 15, and Tobesile, aged 12. The girls ran from the nearby building they were sleeping in, and saw the disturbing scene unfolding. They immediately recognized their cousins, and started yelling their names. The 2 brothers immediately realized that if the rest of the family remains alive, they would surely be caught, as they have now been identified. Leaving their uncle still alive, but completely helpless, they turned their attention on the 2 teenage girls, whom had already started to make their way back to the building they came from. The brothers followed them to the building. In the building was Mantinga's 70-year-old wife, Subanosile, their daughter, 36-year-old Fundile, and 3 toddlers, Amahle, aged 3, Flasanda, aged 2, and Sonkoba, aged 1. None of them would survive this gruesome attack. Sibanelo stood guard outside the building in case someone came to investigate the sound and smoke emanating from the property, while Tulani blindly cut down anyone he could find inside the building. Also inside the building was 2 more people. 18-year-old Mncwabe and an unnamed elderly lady that was mentally handicapped. They would be the only 2 survivors that night. During my research, I could not find any reports that the elderly woman was harmed. But as for Mncwabe, he would spend a great deal of time in hospital, fighting for his life. While unbeknownst to the 2 brothers, there was also another witness. This witness's identity was kept a secret, as it would be this witness that would give information to the police that would lead them directly to the 2 brothers. The police went to the brothers' residence immediately after attending the crime scene and receiving this information. There, they found them both in possession of blood-stained clothes and shoes. The police also found one of their blood-stained jackets shoved in a pit toilet in an attempt to get rid of it. The brothers were immediately arrested and due to appear in the Mthatha Magistrate Court for the bail hearing. But the community was not happy about the possibility of bail for the 2 brothers and had held protests against this. The brothers were also reported to being extremely helpful with the police. So, it was decided to move them directly to the Pietermaritzburg High Court. At this time, it struck me that it is quite clear that 7 people needlessly lost their lives. The 2 brothers were arrested the same day that they committed the crime. Their attempt at removing all the witnesses from the equation was a complete failure. And now that they were caught red-handed, they came completely clean. If you look at it in hindsight, murdering the 7 other members of the family would not have mattered whether or not the brothers got caught. The brothers appeared in front of Judge Jacqueline Henriques. They were prosecuted by Mbongeni Mthembu, and they were defended by advocate Trisha Munsami. The trial progressed remarkably fast and took only a week to come to an end. The brothers had pled guilty, and Judge Henriques accepted their guilty plea. Before the judge passed her sentence, Advocate Munsami appealed not to have the brothers sentenced to life, even though that is the prescribed sentence for planning and executing a murder in South Africa. This was a real WTF moment for me. Now don't get me wrong, I understand that it is an attorney's job to defend their client to the best of their abilities. But I seriously wondered how Advocate Munsami thought that realistically this would work. These men took 8 lives, 5 of which were not even adults yet. 3 of them were babies. all the victims were found with multiple stab wounds to their heads and bodies, while Mantinga was found to be missing his lower limbs, and his body was severely burned. The pathologist ruled his cause of death as blunt force trauma, and the burn wounds he had gotten when the brothers left him still alive to go after his family. How can anyone expect them not to get a life sentence? In fact, this single crime was enough to classify the brothers as mass murderers. The FBI defines mass murder as murdering 4 or more people during an event with no cooling off period between the murders. Advocate Mncwabe's reasons for the appeal was that both men were first offenders. They both pled guilty and cooperated with police fully. They both worked and supported their aged parents, and they were both candidates for rehabilitation. Now, she may have had a few fair points on paper, but if you look at the reality, the first criminal offense was familicide and mass murder. Yes, they pled guilty and cooperated with police. After they had murdered 7 people in an attempt to hide their guilt. So this makes me wonder, if the unnamed witness had not identified them, would they still have admitted guilt? Or would they have kept quiet in an attempt to get away with it? Did they only admit because they got caught? They both worked and supported their aged parents. But at the same time, they took another aged couple from this world, along with that couple's daughter and grandchildren. So does that mean the advocate valued the lives of the parents of these 2 brothers over the 8 lives that were lost? Yes, I do agree. The parents are still alive, the 8 lives are already lost. But that does not mean that those responsible for these 8 lost lives should remain free, just to make their parents' lives more comfortable. And lastly, they were candidates for rehabilitation. Well, all I'm saying is that if they could one day go from being normal law-abiding citizens to committing mass familicide, what would happen if they were seemingly rehabilitated, but something made them snap again one day? It is my personal belief that these 2 men are extremely dangerous and should be treated as such. Luckily, Judge Henriques did not fall for this and remained firm in her judgment. Quote, "Whatever sympathy the court might have had for you pales in comparison to the murders of these victims. One cannot overlook the need for justice for them and their families." End quote. The judge, however, understood that the brothers had murdered Mantinga due to their beliefs in witchcraft. But at the same time, the other 7 victims, especially the toddlers, were innocent. Their death meaningless and simply a product of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Taking this into account, Judge Henriques sentenced them both 7 life sentences for the innocent victims, plus an extra 20 years for the murder of Mantinga. The judge also granted the 2 men leave to appeal their sentences to a full bench, which consists of 3 judges, stating that she does agree that the case is extremely serious, and that this was one of the reasons why 3 heads might be better than 1 when considering an appropriate sentence. The two brothers handed in their appeal the day before the victims were buried. They appealed all 7 life sentences. Most of the Mncwabe extended family was shocked that the brothers would be allowed to appeal, and would later go on to say that they live in fear. The family believed that the brothers did not act alone. They claimed that after the trial they had received threats from rival family members, but believed they were in possession of further evidence that could prove dangerous. The Mncwabe family said that they could not feel comfortable remaining in their community anymore. They felt so unsafe that during the brothers' trial they had been assigned police protection. The government later offered to help these family members in relocating to another area. Unfortunately, this is where the records of this case ends. I've been unable to find any mention of the outcome of the brothers' appeal, or what had happened to the rest of the Mncwabe family. We can only hope that the dark times are over for this family. This is one family that has had enough death. Mantinga Mncwabe, Sibonosile Mncwabe, Fundile Mncwabe, Notando Mncwabe, Tobesile Mncwabe, Amakle Mshlongo, Flesanda Mncwabe, and Sonkoba Komo. You will be remembered in love and in light. Thank you for listening to this rewind case. I promise next time you'll have a full and fresh case for us to go through. Until then, be safe, wicked listeners.